marbles and Poweteers. Welcome to Famicom Dojo. I'm your host, SeanOrange from Powit.tv. Joining me later across the gulf of time and space will be Vinnk from 4-Color Rebellion. We thought for our first installment of Famicom Dojo that we would take a look at the console that revolutionized gaming in the 1980s. The Famicom. The Famicom. Like a mother tucking in her child at night, the Famicom provides a stoic solace, preparing us for the impending rule of our robot overlords. Famicom is short for Family Computer. Up front, we have the power switch, cartridge eject lever, and reset button. The power switch doesn't have a light, but exposes orange paint when the console is switched on. There's also an expansion port in the front that you can use to plug in things like the power glove. Cartridges are inserted into the top loading slot. Just be sure to move the flap out of the way first. On the back, we have the RF switch output, channel 1 or channel 2 selector, TV or game selector, and the AC adapter input. A note to those of you trying to use a Famicom on an American television. The channel 1 spot corresponds to channel 95 on a cable tuner, for some reason. 2 controllers come with the system. Literally, they're attached to the back. If you were to crack open one of these cases, you'll see that the cable actually runs the length of the console and attaches to the circuit board at the front. The result is that the cables are much shorter than they need to be, and you also can't go to the store to buy new ones without doing some major surgery. Perhaps they anticipated people throwing these things in frustration? As you can see, you can't get very good air with this. Controller 2 features a microphone and volume slide, which just outputs sound through the system to the television. Now, some games made crude use of this feature by detecting sound over a certain decibel level, although I'm sure there are some kids who figured out they could annoy their siblings while they were trying to play a game. I, on the other hand, found a very ingenious use for it.
Snake? Snake? Snake!
Because of the length of the cables, in order to get 2 people to use the system at the same time, you had to pull it away from the TV. They don't call it the Family Computer for nothing. Early Famicom and NES ads showed Mom, Dad, the kids all huddled around their new silicon friend. Nintendo released the Famicom in Japan in 1983. At the same time, North America was going through the video game crash, which some thought was the death knell for the home console market. Now this was 2 whole years before Super Mario Bros. Was released. So what did Famicom buyers get with their Famicoms? Popeye. God, do you only ask questions you know the answers to? Popeye was the first ever Nintendo launch title. At this time, Nintendo was making mostly arcade games, like Donkey Kong and the original Mario Bros., and ports of those games for other companies, such as Atari. These games typically featured single playing fields with action happening around a static frame. The Famicom's color depth allowed for a more accurate arcade experience at home. 2 years later, the Nintendo Entertainment System hit Western shores, reconfigured and rebranded as the gray box with which Americans are much more familiar. But that's an entire story in and of itself. Hey man, I'm new around here. Famicom to moshimasu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. What? In 1986, 3 years after the release of the Famicom, Nintendo expanded on their wildly popular Japanese console by releasing the Famicom Disk System. Ooh. The Famicom Disk System. I got nothing. On the front of the disk system is the disk loading slot. Directly underneath is the yellow eject button. Next to both of these is something that the console itself lacks, which is the red activation light, which shows when the disk is being read. The disk system, like the console, can be powered by an AC adapter. Unlike the console, it can also be powered by 6 C-sized batteries. Connected to the back of the disk system is the RAM cartridge. The cartridge itself contains 32 kilobytes of temporary storage memory for games, and acts as the disk controller. The cartridge also contains a new kind of sound chip capable of FM synthesis. Any disk system games using this chip had a unique sound.
Ooh, it's pretty.
There's also this interesting expansion port in the back. The disks are somewhat smaller than 3.5-inch floppies, and contain 64 kilobytes on each side. Many games require loading both sides of the disk into memory.
Yeah. Some games are actually on 2 discs.
In order to save money, Nintendo opted not to use any of the disk protectors that are common on 3.5-inch floppies, although some later disks did have them. Instead, they used paper sleeves and hard plastic cases to keep the disks safe. Now, if the larger storage space and cheaper production costs weren't incentive enough, the other really cool thing that these disks could do was write data.
Oh! Huh.
Oh, hey! There's some saved games! Sweet!
Awesome.
Not only could you save your games, but if you got tired of the game that you had, you could overwrite it entirely. Or you could just buy a blank disc and go to one of the many kiosks around Japan and load your next favorite game onto it. Of course, this rewritability had some drawbacks to it. My first copy of Zelda had this on it. Wrecking Crew? I got pwned.
Oh no!
If you ever have a chance to buy a Disk System game, be sure to test it first. You never know what you're gonna get.
This is the weirdest Zelda game I've ever played.
I did eventually find a copy on a Castlevania disc. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check us out on 4Color Rebellion and Powit.tv. Leave some feedback and tell us what you thought of the show. Until next time.
Famicom Dojo 次回
Hey boys. Hey baby, what you doing out here without your slipcover on? Oi, 彼女、俺に見てくれ。Man, knock it off. You know what pins ain't compatible? 負けた。